It happens in the quiet hours, when the offices along the Tiber have gone dark and only a few windows in the Apostolic Palace still burn. A decision has been signed, the ink is dry, and somewhere in Germany, a man who has carried a red hat for more than 15 years is about to learn that the door he thought he had propped open forever has just been pulled shut. Within the hour, the word will travel from Rome to Munich. And the question every faithful Catholic is asking tonight is the same one whispered in the corridors of the Curia. What was actually said? His name is Reinhard Marx. For most Catholics outside Europe, the name means little. But inside the Church, it is one of the most powerful names of the last 2 decades. Cardinal Marx is the Archbishop of Munich and Freising, one of the great historic sees of German Catholicism. He sat for years on the small circle of advisors that Pope Francis called the Council of Cardinals, the inner ring that helped reshape how Rome itself is governed. Few men have stood closer to the center of power, and few men have pushed harder to change the direction the Church was moving. Before we go further, if you treasure these stories from inside the Church, take 1 second to subscribe and leave a comment telling us where in the world you are watching from tonight. There are more of us than you think, and it matters that we stand together. Now let us return to Rome. To understand what just happened, you have to understand what Germany tried to build. It began in 2019. The Church in Germany, shaken by years of abuse revelations and emptying pews, launched something it called the Synodale Weg. In English, the Synodal Way. It was sold as a path of healing, a great conversation about the future. But the questions it put on the table were not small ones. They were questions that struck at the foundations. The Synodal Way debated blessings for same-sex couples. It debated whether women could be ordained, at least to the diaconate. It debated priestly celibacy. It debated a new form of governance, where lay people would share authority with bishops through a permanent council. To its supporters, this was renewal. To Rome, it was something else. It was a local church reaching for decisions that belonged to the whole church, the universal church, the church of every nation and every century. And from the beginning, Cardinal Marx was its most prominent face. When the German bishops gathered, his was the voice that carried. When the world looked at the German reform movement and asked, who leads this? The answer, again and again, was Munich. Marx. Rome watched, and Rome did not stay silent. As early as 2019, a senior cardinal in the Vatican, Marc Ouellet, sent warnings to the German bishops. The message was direct. A single national church cannot decide these matters on its own. Questions of ordination, of the nature of the priesthood, of the moral teaching on marriage, these belong to the Church entire. They cannot be settled by a vote in one country. Then came an even graver voice. In 2021, the retired Pope Benedict XVI, the great German theologian himself, is reported to have written privately to express his deep concern about where the Synodal Way was heading. A German Pope watching the German Church and afraid. That image alone should tell you how serious the moment had become. And in those same years, Cardinal Marx did something that stunned the Catholic world. In June of 2021, he offered his resignation as Archbishop of Munich. He wrote that he was willing to bear personal responsibility for the catastrophe of clerical abuse, and not only his own mistakes, but what he called a systemic failure across the Church. It was an extraordinary letter to a prince of the Church, laying down his office. But Pope Francis refused it. Within days, Francis told him to stay, to carry the burden, to keep his post. And so Marx remained. He remained the Archbishop of Munich. He remained on the Council of Cardinals. He remained the face of the German movement. The resignation that might have ended his story instead became a chapter that strengthened it. The reform path pressed on. Then, everything changed in Rome. In December of 2023, the Vatican released a document called Fiducia Supplicans. It opened a narrow door. Priests could offer a simple, spontaneous blessing to people in irregular situations, including same-sex couples, as long as it was nothing like a wedding. No ritual, no liturgy, no imitation of marriage. A blessing for persons, the document insisted, not an approval of unions. For much of the world, that careful line held, but in Germany, some wanted to walk straight through it. Building on the synodal way, German leaders began drafting handbooks, suggested words, suggested gestures borrowed from the marriage rite, structured services, things that looked to Roman eyes exactly like the formal ceremonies that Fiducia Supplicans had forbidden. And so Rome wrote again. In November of 2024, the Dicastery for the Doctrine of the Faith, the office that guards the teaching of the Church, sent a letter to the German bishops. It was firm. It rejected ritualized blessings of same-sex couples. It warned against creating para-liturgies that resembled marriage. It said plainly that such forms risk legitimizing what the Church does not bless. The letter would later be made public, and when it was, the German faithful read its words in black and white. Rome had said no, not in anger, in doctrine. This was the ground, the cracked, tense, decades-old ground. And then a new figure walked onto it. On the 8th of May, 2025, white smoke rose over the Sistine Chapel, and the church had a new pope. He took the name Leo XIV. Born Robert Francis Prevost, he was the first pope ever to come from the United States of America. A man shaped by missionary years in Peru, by long service in Rome, by a quiet and deliberate temperament. The world did not quite know what to expect from him. Many in the German church hoped he would be soft. They hoped he would let the experiment continue. They hoped the new pope would look away. He did not look away. In the first year of his pontificate, Leo XIV made his position unmistakable. On a flight back from Africa in the spring of 2026, a reporter asked him directly about formal blessings for same-sex couples. The new pope did not hesitate. The Holy See, he said, does not agree with the formalized blessing of such couples, beyond the narrow allowance that already existed. He warned that pushing further would deepen division in the church. Calm words, firm words, the kind of words that close a door rather than open one. And then, in May of 2026, the Vatican made public that earlier letter, the one rejecting the German blessing rituals. The timing spoke louder than any speech. Under Leo, Rome was not retreating. Rome was holding the line, and holding it in daylight, where every bishop in Germany could see. Now picture what this means for a man like Cardinal Marx. For years he had been the face of a movement that believed the future belonged to it. He had instructed his own archdiocese to make blessings more available. He had championed change as the only way to keep the young from leaving. He had told the world that a church which refuses these questions cannot, in his words, remain the church of the next generation. And now a new pope, an American, was telling Germany that the answer was still no. The faithful imagine the scene. A room in Rome, the German cardinals seated, the decision laid before them, gentle in tone, absolute in substance, and one can almost see the moment the weight of it lands. The realization that the man who once knelt to offer his resignation, who was told to stay and carry on, has now run into a wall that will not move. Whether he rises and leaves the table, whether he simply lowers his eyes, the meaning is the same. The German path has met the rock of Peter, and the rock has not yielded. We should be honest with you, because you deserve honesty. There is no public film of a cardinal storming out of a sealed chamber. There is no leaked transcript of a single shouted line. What there is something more real and more lasting than any dramatic exit. There is a documented collision between the most powerful reform movement in modern Catholicism and a pope who has quietly decided it will not pass. And in that collision, the figure of Cardinal Marx stands exactly where he has always stood, at the front. The walkout that the faithful sense is not a stunt. It is the slow walking away of an entire vision from the table of the universal church. So what was said? In the deepest sense, this is what was said. Rome said that doctrine is not a national matter. Rome said that the teaching on marriage is not Germany's to rewrite. Rome said that a blessing of persons is not a blessing of unions, and that the difference is not a technicality, but a truth. And Rome said all of this not with thunder, but with the quiet certainty of a church that has weathered 2,000 years of men who were sure they knew better. For Cardinal Marx, the message could not be clearer. The door he believed he had opened has been closed by the very office he once helped to advise. The Council of Cardinals does not write doctrine. The synodal way does not bind the world. And a pope, even a new and unfamiliar one, even an American, holds the keys that were handed down from a fisherman in Galilee. Why does this matter to you, watching tonight? Perhaps alone, perhaps unable to sleep, your phone glowing in the dark. It matters because this is the question beneath all the others. Who decides what the church believes? Is it the spirit of the age, the surveys, the fear of empty pews? Or is it the deposit of faith, handed down, guarded, unchangeable in its heart? The German synodal way was, in the end, a test of that question. And under Leo XIV, the answer came back from Rome with a stillness that was almost frightening in its confidence. Think of what it took for the new pope to hold this line. He could have chosen the easy road. He could have let Germany do as it wished and called it dialogue. He could have bought peace by looking away. Many expected exactly that. Instead, a man barely a year into his office, facing the wealthiest and most organized bishops in the Western Church, said no, not with cruelty, not with insult, with the plain, immovable word of one who believes he answers to God before he answers to any council. And for those who have watched the church drift, who have wondered whether anything still holds, this is a strange and powerful comfort, because it means the office still has weight. The chair of Peter is not an ornament. When a pope speaks on doctrine, even a pope no one fully understood at his election, the whole church must reckon with it. Germany has learned this. Cardinal Marx has learned this. And the lesson is being read tonight in living rooms from Manila to Munich to the small towns of the American Midwest. There will be more chapters. Marx has not been removed. The German bishops have not all submitted. The dialogue, as Rome calls it, continues. Some German leaders insist that any talk of Vatican sanctions is premature. That conversation goes on, and it does. But everyone now knows the shape of the room. They know where the floor ends and the wall begins. They know that the new pope will speak softly and refuse firmly, and that the refusing is the part that lasts. This is the meaning for your faith. The church is not yours to fear losing. It has survived emperors and heresies, betrayals from within and armies from without. It has survived bad popes and weak ones and saints disguised as ordinary men. It is surviving this. The tensions in Germany are real. The grief of those who wanted change is real. But the thread that runs from Peter to Leo XIV has not broken. It bends under the weight of every age, and it holds. So when you hear that a powerful cardinal has, in effect, walked away from a table he could not bend to his will, do not hear only conflict. Hear continuity. Hear the sound of a church that after 2,000 years still knows how to say no when no is what truth requires. The decision was made in the quiet hours, far from cameras, in rooms most of us will never enter, but its echo reaches all the way to where you sit tonight. What was said in the room was, in the end, very old. It was the same thing the church has said since the beginning. We did not invent this faith, and so we are not free to remake it. We only guard it and hand it on, and trust that the one who promised the gates of hell would not prevail meant exactly what he said. Cardinal Marx heard it, Germany heard it, and now, in the glow of your screen, in the silence of the late hour, you have heard it too. The line holds, and the church goes on.